I mean, looking at those numbers there, we see that the countries run by women seem to be doing better as a general theme. Do you think that can be put down to the fact that they have female leaders?
I wouldn't necessarily go on those numbers because obviously the UK and the US are both large countries and 3 of the 4 others that you had on screen are small. But the point I've made is that I believe that on average, the female leaders have actually done rather better than the men. That's not to say there are men leaders who haven't done well. I think, for example, the President of the Republic of Korea has done extremely well. But the women have been seen to be consultative, engaged, taking their populations with them, listening to and acting on advice and being empathetic. And I think that's counted a lot in the very good responses many of them have had.
So you think that the sort of traits that perhaps, you know, females typically have can be of greater use in a situation like this compared to those of men when it comes to dealing with a pandemic?
So again, it's very hard to generalise because there's women leaders and women leaders as well. But the characteristics I've described are more often associated with the female gender. However, there's a lot of literature in the corporate world, for example, that shows that if men adopt these kinds of ways of working, consultative, listening, more lateral, less hierarchical, they too will enjoy a better success. So I think we should focus on a style of leadership which is of benefit wherever it is practiced and by whomever it's practiced.
OK. Well, Rachel Johnson joins us as well. She's a journalist and presenter, of course, and I'm undoubtedly have an opinion on this. Thank you, Rachel. We got your line back up and running. We lost you just on the introduction. What's your feeling about this? Of course, you're very close to the Prime Minister of our country as his sister, but you undoubtedly will have a strong opinion. Is it women that make better leaders than men?
I agree with what Helen said. I think what's so important when you've got you know, a very tight, small group of middle-aged men making decisions that affect 66 million people in our country, it just makes sense to have some women in the room. So, you know, when it comes to, let's say, lockdown, you get a sense of the sequencing, which actually has a sort of emotional logic to it. You know, some people don't really want to go to a garden centre, but they really want to see their mother, or they want to, you know, be able to see more than one parent at once. So there's this sense that, you know, most of us, a lot of us, there's been a joke going on the rounds, would prefer to have spent lockdown with our hairdressers than our husbands. But of course, these decisions have been taken in a blanket way, affecting the entire population, but without women's input. And I think that's been problematic.
I'm sure that's not fair. There will be women in the room. There will be women consulted. They will be part of the committees. They will be part of the raids. There will be people that were offering an opinion. It's not just men sitting in a room making the decisions. Well,
you know, I'm not in Downing Street and I'm definitely not in the cabinet. But from what I've heard, it is a tight quartet of people that are taking very big decisions. And sometimes the rest of the cabinet and the other ministers are being told what they are, you know, after the announcements have been made. But anyway, look, that's by the by. I think Helen's right. I mean, I don't think it's a question of if you're a man, you're bad at this. If you're a woman, you're good at this. This exposed strong men for their weakness, and it's shown women in their strength. What Helen is saying is that women are more collaborative. You know, we go back to the old cliche that if it was called Lehman Sisters, we probably wouldn't have had a financial crash. But, you know, what changed afterwards? We still have men in the main running most businesses, and more men in politics than women. So you can have these kind of great epiphanies that women do things well and companies do well and governments do well and they're run by women. But after the crisis, nothing really seems to change. Not enough, anyway.
Ella, coming to you on this, because what's your view? You've heard there the suggestion that women have a more collaborative approach, the kind of skills that they've got suit this kind of, you know, dealing with a crisis and looking at what can be done and the methods for going about that.
Yeah, I mean, women are nice, we're caring, we do the job with a smile. I mean, I have to blink and check that I'm not in the middle of an 18th century novel here. The stereotyping and the kind of treating women like a homogenous blob of nice ladies is frankly, sexist. It's the kind of generalisation that kept us away from politics for so long. Do I need to name a few names? Thatcher, Theresa May, someone tweeted into you earlier, and San Suu Kyi. I mean, there are female leaders who have had appalling records and have had acted not only badly in a crisis, but criminally in a crisis. So I think that's a question about the generalisation. But I just want to really stress this point. I mean, the way in which leaders act shouldn't be down to their gender. And it's a really big problem to talk about women in this way. Because instead of treating us like individuals and instead of assessing us on what we do, on the actions we take, on what we say, there's this sort of general sense that simply having a bit more lipstick in the room makes things better. I mean, that really is the kind of underpinning of former sexist ideology, which treated all women as the same. We have to really reject this. And in a little bit more contemporary example, I mean, people have been celebrating the actions of Angela Merkel and saying that she's acted really well. I mean, her treatment of Italy, for example, and Germany's reluctance initially to help out Italy was quite remarkable. I mean, the EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen had to come out and apologise. Another huge female leader had to apologise because of the way in which Italy, at that time in which we were seeing dead bodies stacking up and horrendous scenes from hospitals in Italy, that the EU and particularly Germany was reluctant to help them. So let's be careful here when we talk about caring female leaders. Yeah. Because as many as you can list off that are nice, I can list off some that are particularly despicable.
Helen, there is a worry, isn't there, that narrative, as Ellen was just pointing out, that narrative can be damaging. The idea that just because they're women, they're going to be more compassionate, they're going to be more caring, as opposed to just judging people on their characteristics that make them great leaders.
Well, of course, and that's why I said you can't generalise, and there's not one model of woman who rises to be a leader. But I think what we have to focus on here is what has characterised the successful performance of these women as they have led through the pandemic. And they have exhibited a range of traits of being consultative and listening and empathetic and engaging and so on. And that where those approaches are applied, whether by men or by women, they've been successful. It just so happens that on average, the women leaders appear to have done rather better because of the style they've adopted. I think that's what we need to focus on.